So the funny thing about this movie, me and this movie, let's just say, is that this was supposed to be the first commentary I was going to do. Now, unfortunately, I fell asleep like 20 minutes to the end of that movie. I was out like a light. You could hear me snoring for 20 minutes. I decided to ditch the audio and do a new one, which was House of the Dead. And I just said, nah, I'll just do that another time, I guess. Then I had this idea to do the reaction review thing. I see a lot of YouTubers do it. I figured I'll do it myself. Do this. I'll try my hand at this format, and I'm gonna do it now. So I'm gonna start with the movie I was gonna start with the commentary with. And overall, my feelings on this particular film is just it's average. It's not bad. I mean, out of all the 6 Resident Evil movies that are currently, I liked 2 of them, and those 2 were just average at best. So, yeah, I'm gonna just watch this one instead and give my thoughts on this movie. I will give it from a fan perspective. I will also give it from just a movie viewer perspective. I'm not gonna just be like, "Well, this ain't like the game, so this sucks." Because I don't. I already said this before. I don't. It doesn't have to be like the game. If you're gonna do that with like something like Mortal Kombat or Tekken, maybe Street Fighter, be my guest. Because there's a story to those games, but there's no story mode. There's no progressing story in later games, sure, especially for Mortal Kombat, where they pretty much rebooted the entire Mortal Kombat universe. But in later games like Tekken 6 and 7 and Street Fighter 4, maybe 5, they added story modes where you can follow the story and you can, follow along what's going on. Fighting games weren't like that back then. They were just punch the guy and kill him and then move on to the next person and kill him. Rinse and repeat. Resident Evil, on the other hand, was not like that. It's a progressing story. It was kind of a mystery with that game. What's going on with Barry? What's he hiding? And where's Wesker been? Why is Wesker out of this? Why is Wesker gone? You know, Rebecca, like, what's she doing? And who's killing off the Stars members? Where did these monsters come from? Who created this T virus? What the hell is happening? And I don't want to see that on screen where I'm gonna watch this movie and I'm be like, I could just stay at home and play a superior version of that story on a GameCube. And if the movie they end up, if they should they happen to make a movie like that, ends up being that bad, I can get a superior version of that story on a PlayStation as well. So it'll likely be that bad because movies based on video games have a very bad history. I can count on like one hand how many of them I actually enjoyed, and all of them are average at best. So with Resident Evil, I prefer not to have that. I prefer anything. If anything, I would prefer the CG Resident Evil movies like Degeneration, Damnation, Vendetta. Some of them might not be that great, but at least it's original. At least it's not like we're copying the game. I don't want that. But with this movie, they try to do this as like a prequel to Resident Evil. And if you know the Resident Evil lore and the stories, even back as far back as the first game, you know why that doesn't work. But it's fine. It's not that bad. At least as far as I remember, it wasn't that bad. So yeah, let's just jump right into it, as Philip DeFranco would say. Resident Evil. Screen gems back when movies were so bad they were good. Or they were good. They were mostly good. They were mostly so bad they were good. Nowadays they're mostly just bad and you have rare gems of good movies, actually good movies in there somewhere. Like back then we had Ghost of Mars, the one. This is just from screen gens alone. And Ghost of Mars was fine. The one was kind of boring, but I mean, back then movies that were bad usually were so bad they were good. Look at now. How often we get a so bad is good movie? How often do we get a movie like Street Fighter or Doom? Or we don't get that anymore. We just get either it's bad or it's good or it's passable. And we have rare passable or good movies now. Wow, that's fucking tragic.
At the beginning of the 21st century, the Umbrella Corporation had become the largest commercial entity in the United States.
So the interesting thing about this narration is that it's almost right out of the games in terms of there being a narration before Resident Evil story. The first, let's say, 4 games, because that's what came out before the 2002 Resident Evil movie. There's Resident Evil 1, 2, Nemesis, and Code Veronica. Each one of those games had a brief like narration that tells you, why are we here? What are we doing right now? And why should we care about the story? And in some cases, in the case of the sequels more specifically, they would give you a brief recap of the previous game, but also give you a little brief like aftermath, like what happened after this. And in this case, they're just telling you. In the movie's case, they're telling you about the Umbrella Corporation. How does the public see them, or rather, what does the public see? And then what the public doesn't see, and even based on the narration, what some of their own employees don't even know about, is that they're into some really illegal stuff like genetic experimentation, viral weaponry, real black market shit that they shouldn't be doing. So it gives you a brief little like synopsis of what Umbrella is about, you know. And oddly enough, this guy who's doing the narration is voiced by Jason Isaacs, who, you know, he played Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies. He's pretty big actor in general, not just for Harry Potter but for other films as well. He did this narration and he was credited as William Birkin. His voice pops up again later in the film, but it's interesting that they labeled him as or credited him as William Birkin in the IMDb because William Birkin is nowhere to be found in these movies. In fact, the dialogue that you hear Jason Isaacs say later towards the end of the movie is actually repeated again by Thomas Kretschmann's character Timothy Kane in Resident Evil Apocalypse. So it's kind of interesting. Like, was this all Major Kane from the beginning? Like, what I don't understand. But the funny thing is like Birkin was not in this film series, but there was a Birkin substitute kinda in Charles Ashford. There's definitely a Sherry Birkin substitute with Angela Ashford in Resident Evil Apocalypse. But her father in that same movie, I guess, is a William Birkin substitute. He created the T virus and stuff. I don't know. It's a bunch of weird shit with that. This whole movie kind of can't be consistent with who created the T virus. We don't even know anymore. I don't know. I kind of wish we had more Jason Isaacs. Funny enough, Jason Isaacs in this narration sounds very similar, if not identical, to the narrator in Resident Evil 2.
Unknown even to its own employees, its massive profits are generated by military technology, genetic experimentation, and viral weaponry.
It was later revealed that the terrible disaster had been caused by the T virus, a mutagenic toxin created by the international enterprise Umbrella Incorporated for use in bioweapon experiments.
So I think that was pretty interesting. I wonder if that was even deliberate or if that was just, you know, whatever, they just got him because his voice. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, I wish we kind of had Jason Isaacs in some capacity. Also, oddly enough, the character Dr. Isaacs, Dr. Alexander Isaacs, who you'll see in Resident Evil, at the end of Resident Evil Apocalypse, he becomes a major villain in both Resident Evil Extinction and the final chapter. The character's name Isaacs was based on Jason Isaacs, apparently. So I guess that's as close as we got to Jason Isaacs in anything in the Resident Evil related. I don't know, maybe it was for the best, because, I mean, I don't think these films would have boosted his career, considering he was knee-deep in Harry Potter at the time, so, yeah, that's whatever. But, yeah, it is what it is. So I do kind of like this shot, even though Paul Anderson claims that it was filmed live, like, in a tunnel, and he was pulling into the... I don't know if he said that that's what they were going to do, or that's what they did, but it doesn't look that way. It looks like they just pull the frame, the actual shot out of blackness or something, like in editing or some shit. I don't know, or maybe it's that good that we couldn't even notice that. But it's a pretty nice shot. It's actually a pretty iconic shot. Bear in mind, a lot of any iconic shots in the Resident Evil film franchise, is only in this movie. You know, Alice kicking the dog, the slow motion bullets, the laser grid sequence, I think there's a bunch of other shit there too, actually. The eye, opening the eye, that was pretty iconic shot to Resident Evil. In fact, they use that so many damn times in almost every Resident Evil movie. They use the eye opening thing. So, they have a lot of iconic shots in this film, but this is kind of one of them. I do like this, and according to Paul Anderson, it was his idea to pull you into the world of Resident Evil, and I'm like, all right, that's nice. I can deal with that. The other thing I want to mention also is the music. The music done by Marco Beltrami and Marilyn Manson, which I think is pretty good. I mean, I actually like their collaboration on this film. I kind of wish they stuck around because I think this soundtrack is the most Resident Evil sounding music in the entire franchise. Because from here on, they go from more orchestral, action-packed music in Resident Evil Apocalypse. There's a slight sort of techno horror thing with Resident Evil Extinction. And then there's complete rock music, rock techno music in Resident Evil Afterlife and Retribution. The final chapter, I don't remember their music very well. I don't remember a lot of things from that movie. I know I hated it when I first saw it, so that should tell you enough. But this soundtrack for the first movie is the most Resident Evil sounding of it. The most eeriest music in this film is probably the Red Queen's theme. When you first meet the Red Queen, there's like this really fucked up sounding melody to it. I'm like, wow, that's kind of, you can't really hear it because there's characters talking over it, but if you hear it in isolation, it's pretty disturbing. I'm not gonna play it because no, YouTube would be on my balls for that. And plus, I mean, just look it up, you know. I mean, don't worry, I'm gonna give examples of things I'm talking about, but you know, if it's gonna dick me over in the end, I'm not gonna do it. If I feel like it's gonna dick me over, no. But either way, the soundtrack is actually really good. I think this is probably the only horror sounding Resident Evil movie of the bunch. Like, there's somewhat that in Extinction. I think the final chapter had it too. I'm guessing. I don't know, but there was some of that in Resident Evil Extinction, which is why part of why those two are my favorite. One in Extinction because they feel like they tried to be horror movies. They tried their best to be as horror as possible. And whereas the other four movies just didn't try at all. They just tried to be more action-packed, which is like, yeah, okay, but that's not Resident Evil. I mean, it doesn't have to be 100% exact like the game. Like I said before, it doesn't have to be like that. But at the same time, at least try, you know? Yeah, like, there's certain things you can't put on screen, sure, but at least try, you know? It's also funny that I say, "Oh, that's not Resident Evil. The action-packed thing, that's not Resident Evil." And then meanwhile, I just immediately thought back to the fucking Chris Redfield punching boulders and Leon Kennedy fucking in a helicopter just sideswiping a fucking train and shit in Resident Evil 6. It's like, oh my god. Yeah, the games weren't initially action adventure. They were more survival horror until around about Resident Evil 4, where they kind of had a balance between the horror and action, you know? And that was the perfect balance. 5 just said, we'll do more action, and then 6 just said, fuck it, action. Where the only horror element in the game, the most horror elements of the game came from Leon's campaign, being the most Resident Evil of the 4 campaigns. Everything else was just complete action. Chris, Ada, and Jake's campaign were all action. But that's what the movies became, you know, in the end. Like after Extinction, you know, it was kind of perplexing to see that in Apocalypse, you know, it's action, like what the hell? But then they brought it back a little bit. They toned it down just a bit in Resident Evil Extinction. And then Afterlife onward just went full action. Just, yeah, let's have rock music, let's have 3D, let's have slow motion, let's have, you know, spin kicking monsters' heads, and it got ridiculous, you know. It's good to see that Resident Evil's bringing back the horror elements, because they don't. I feel like at a time there's like, you guys forgot what made this series great, you know. But then they had Revelations 2, Resident Evil 7. They're now doing Resident Evil 8 now. They did the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3, which were pretty decent. Well, 2 was pretty decent. I heard 3 wasn't good. So, you know, take what you can get, you know. I'm not saying accept whatever is given to you, but I'm just glad to see that Capcom is starting to lean back into what brought him to the dance, you know, as far as Resident Evil goes. It's funny because Spence is like responsible for a majority of the continuity errors in this movie. So if you look at the man in this helmet, you see he has a mask on his face if you look carefully at it. Then when you see this flashback later, you see this scene again in flashback, he has no mask on his face. He's just completely barefaced. And I'm just like, that, okay. There's a few continuity errors as far as Spence goes. And what's also funny is you can clearly see that you can see the guy's wearing a jacket. You see his arm there, he's wearing a jacket. You kind of see his face as he's closing the door. I mean, who else is wearing a leather jacket in this movie other than Spence? I mean, if you're watching it for the first time, you probably wouldn't notice it. But the more you look at it, the more you're like, yeah, that was totally Spence. How did I not see that? Another little continuity thing is the fact that there are 7 vials of the T-virus in that container and 7 vials of antivirus, but this guy has one spare one to just throw, I guess. I guess he had that in his pocket. Because later on in the movie, there are still 14 vials of T-virus / antivirus still sitting there. So, I don't know. Maybe I don't know where he got that from, because it wasn't in that fucking thing he got. He was just pulling those viruses from. Fun fact, the blonde there is Jeremy Bolt's sister, Anna Bolt, who does pop up again in this movie as a zombie. Jeremy Bolt himself actually pops up like 4 times in this movie, so you know, that's kind of cool. I think she's actually an actress as well, because when I looked up the IMDb cast list to find Jason Isaacs, his name in that credits, she's has a full picture and everything. So I guess she still does acting, maybe not. I don't know. Who knows?
It's nothing. Fire drill.
Nice little detail here is that this woman we find out later is Matt's sister Lisa, and she's on the phone saying, "Hey, it's just a fire drill." So we kind of assume she's talking to someone outside of the hive, and she could be talking to Matt, because that's when he doesn't hear from her for another few hours. He decides to go to the mansion to find out and investigate what's going on, hence his involvement. So it was a nice little detail, I thought, that, you know, gives Matt a reason to go there, because he's like, wait, we haven't heard from her in hours. I was on the phone with her, she said it was a fire drill, and we haven't heard from her again. But I might as well go there and find out, you know? The guy's mouth didn't even move when he's yelling, hey. His mouth is just like barely moving. Actually, fun fact, that guy's, I think, the fight coordinator for this movie. I remember seeing him in the featurette, so that's good on him. He actually gets a kind of some good spots in this movie, as also as a zombie. Maybe we'll see him later.
What's the problem?
The doors won't open.
What about the ones at the back?
Locked as well.
One little odd thing is that Lisa is actually British in this movie. Although the actress herself is German, but the character, I'm assuming, is British. And I thought it was kind of strange, considering Matt's clearly American. He doesn't have a British accent at all. So my question is, are he and Lisa step-siblings? Is that possible? I mean, it's not impossible. I just thought it was strange when he said she's my sister, and I'm like, from another parent, right? It's like, I don't know. Maybe they are step-siblings. I don't know. It's never specified that. I love that this movie kind of tricks the audience into thinking this is in a building, like an office building in the middle of the city somewhere. We don't know that for sure yet. I mean, unless you saw the trailer, you kind of assume that this is underground. But when you see this with no context, no trailer, you're just watching this for the first time. And even if you don't know Resident Evil at all, you're just kind of like, oh, this is in an office building and there's going to be some viral outbreak in the city or something. But no, it's actually all underground. This is all happening underground. And they do a kind of a decent job of concealing that, kind of. Because you don't know that at first, unless you know the game and unless you've seen the trailer. You don't know that. You're just kind of like, oh, this is happening here. So that when you see Alice in the mansion, you're like, okay, we're in a different place now. And then you realize, oh no, this is all in the same place. This is all in one big area. You know, it's just they did such a decent job of concealing that, or hiding the fact that this is all happening in one area. But it also kind of fools you into thinking it's happening in 2 different areas. But instead, no, it's happening in one area. And it's kind of crazy to think that everyone in Raccoon City that's miles away from this has no fucking clue as to what's going on. That's such a kind of a scary thought, too.
We have to get out of here. We have to get out of here. Take it easy. Do you take it easy?
That acting, though. But this is what I was saying. What I was saying before about how they trick you into thinking it's a building, but really it's just an underground lab. But this guy knows this is an underground lab, so why is he calling it a building? I mean, I guess it can be a building, but I don't know. It's just kind of an odd choice of words for a guy who's knows he's in an underground facility. As terrifying as that elevator falling and killing everyone is as terrifying as that kind of looks, that CGI, as well as like the majority of the CGI in this movie, actually all of the CGI in this movie, has aged so poorly. Like, you can tell this was made in the 2000s. Like, wow. I love that some of these people look like, I'm dying. I am dying of gas. The only one selling this is this actress who plays Lisa. I forget her name, actually. But she's the only one selling it in a pretty cool way. Everyone else just looks like they're just falling and trying to hold their chest and stuff. It just looks funny. So the Halon kills everyone here. but they don't kill Allison Spence later on, or earlier on, I should say. Like they get the nice little amnesia knockout gas, whereas everyone else just gets fucking slaughtered by the gas and by elevators and shit. So I don't know what the Red Queen was thinking there. I don't know why the Red Queen felt the need to do that. I know that says it's part of the Red Queen's defense systems, but it's like, but if it had the wherewithal to kill everyone in the hive, why didn't it just kill these other people too? And why didn't they kill these commandos also, like immediately as they came in, crashing through the windows and shit? I don't know.
We have to get out of here. We have to get out of this building.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're a smart motherfucker, that's right.
So despite me saying that this movie does trick audiences into thinking this is in a building, why does this guy say we have to get out of this building? It's like, you're not in an actual building. You're in a underground laboratory. I mean, I guess technically it's a building, but I don't know. It was just such kind of weird dialogue for him to say.